Hello, and welcome to Introducing Me. I'm your host, Sarah. I started this podcast to get to know other people and lifestyles while discovering more about myself. Each episode, I will give a new guest a chance to discuss their background, culture, interests, or whatever they want to talk about to help increase all of our own worldviews. Today, I'd like to introduce you to Lisa Cox. Nearly 2 decades ago, Lisa had a successful career in corporate advertising agencies when life took a turn. Medically, she died twice in a hospital, and now Lisa is changing social attitudes towards disability. So I'm excited to have Lisa here talking about, the past couple years of her life, what she's got going on. And I'm grateful for her to be here today. So thank you so much, Lisa. Why don't you go ahead and tell the audience more about yourself?
Sure. Hey, Sarah, and hey, everyone. It's really great to be here this morning. So I guess I could tell you all the professional stuff, which is what I like talking about, but there's that disability thing that is such a huge part of my life these days. So I was born neurodivergent, but didn't realise it at the time. And when I was 24, the proverbial really hit the fan. I was at the airport one morning and had a stroke. So fortunately, they didn't let me board the plane. I just started talking gibberish and collapsed and don't remember any of that, but I went into hospital, was in a coma for 3 weeks, on life support for 2 months, and in hospital for over a year. And during that first year, it was on a lot of stuff happened. I've been back plenty of times since, and this was almost 20 years ago. So my left leg, all of my right toes, and 9 of my fingertips were amputated. I had heart surgery, total hip replacement, and they're all the invisible things that you can see. I'm like a patchwork quilt. Your listeners can't see it, but under all these clothes, there's missing pieces and scars everywhere. But there's a lot of scarring on my brain, and that causes more challenges for me with all the invisible disabilities. So I'm over 25% blind, have epilepsy. My speech has been a little bit affected, gets worse and better depending on how tired I am and things like that. Chronic pain, chronic fatigue are also a really fun part of my life. Excuse the sarcasm, but that's me now. So it's been nearly 20 years that I've been living this life with really severe disabilities, a prosthetic leg, in a wheelchair full time, and just learning to get back to some sort of normality, I suppose.
So what was it like that kind of first year being in a hospital? Like, what really changed in your life? Like, was it kind of night and day? Like, you were healthy, you were doing all of these things, then it got just kind of all piled on at once in that first year?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I was a fit and healthy 24-year-old, didn't fit the normal stereotypes of what someone, smoking, obese, all those sorts of things. I was none of that people would normally have a stroke. So it came as a shock to me and my family, obviously. And then that first year in hospital, the first few months I was on so much medication that I wasn't really aware of what was happening. And then on one hand, I was bored out of my mind and terrified. But on the other hand, it sounds really, really trite, and I don't want it to sound silly, but I was incredibly grateful because I knew that, one, I wasn't supposed to be alive. My family got the call to say, come to interstate to Melbourne. She's not going to be alive in the morning. They were told they might have to turn off my life support, all sorts of things like that. And secondly, yes, I was in a public hospital bed with really shitty hospital food, but that was a hell of a lot better than a lot of people in other parts of the world that I'd travelled to in my previous years. And so I tried to keep that in mind because, there was nothing I could do to change my situation. I could only really change how I thought about it and things like that.
And so then how did your career change as you were getting out of the hospital?
Yeah, it's definitely changed. So I used to work full-time in advertising agencies as a copywriter. So for those who aren't familiar with that, I made advertising. I wrote the scripts for radio and TV and things like that, and helped to produce them. And then I wrote the ads in the paper or the magazine or on the website or something like that. So loved my job so much, working in media, in a creative industry, all those sorts of things. And then when this happened, all I wanted to do was go back to work. I desperately wanted to go back to work, couldn't wait. But at that time, I couldn't even hold a pen to write my name, couldn't write, couldn't do anything. And even though I'm independent now, back then all I could do was blink my eyes, wiggle my fingers, and that was all the movement I could do. So couldn't do anything, but my head was just churning through ideas. And as I now realise that was my ADHD brain, wouldn't be quiet. But had my sister who worked in advertising bringing in advertising briefs to me in the hospital so I could think about things like that. So as soon as I could, I got back to work in advertising agencies, but soon realised that it wasn't the right fit for me. But now what I do is combine my professional background with my lived experience and help brands and businesses who want to be inclusive and include disability in their advertising and content and things, but really don't know where to start. And I come at that as someone who used to be that non-disabled person who wanted to do better but just didn't know where to start, and shouting at people from Twitter or X or whatever it is now, and that wasn't going to help. I needed practical solutions and industry experience. So that's what I try to bring to the businesses and individuals I work with now, is that level of understanding of industry experience, but also lived experience.
And so what sort of things do you do to help advertising agencies or these companies who want to be more inclusive when it comes to disability? What kind of suggestions are you giving them so it is authentic and it is relative to like your lived experience?
Sure. Well, rather than just my lived experience, try and make it as much of the disability community as I can. But people can get so overwhelmed that we have to do everything we can for everyone. That's not the case. The first thing, like consistency, is a really obvious one. If you're going to include disability in your advertising, for example, don't just do it once a year on International Day of People with Disability or once every 4 years when the Paralympics is on. Make it a consistent, incidental and seamless inclusion just all the time. If you have 5 guys standing at the bar, then why not make one of them disabled, just as an example. Another thing is to engage with the disability community. So if there's not a disabled creative, a writer or a art director, a producer or something like that on the creative team, then look at bringing in experts, because often you can get a bunch of non-disabled creators who have the very best of intentions and maybe write a script or an ad that's so tokenistic and cringeworthy, but they don't realise that because they haven't got that lens to see it through. So someone like myself can come in and say, no, you might want to just do this. And often it's really tiny tweaks about how they pan the camera or changing a word or two or things like that. But talking them through that and understanding that they do have the best of intentions, and good on them for trying, because often people are so afraid that they do nothing, and that's not the right answer.
And so do you find that these companies you're connecting with, that there is good intent, that they are trying, and that, you are surrounded by an inclusive culture, or are there still some struggles with even just kind of integrating disability into the day-to-day?
Oh, there's definitely still struggles. So in an ideal world, I would love for them to look at it holistically and go, okay, we want inclusion in our advertising, but in our workplaces as well, and not just in entry-level jobs, but in HR, in all the levels on board. But we have to start somewhere. So perhaps for them, it's inclusion in advertising. But I asked them to also look at maybe their workplace, who with a disability is working there, or is the workplace psychologically safe so that people with an invisible disability feel comfortable disclosing, because that's another problem we see is that there's actually more people with disabilities in your workplace than you thought, but the environment is not psychologically safe and people are afraid of losing their jobs or being bullied or something like that. So they don't disclose it and as a result aren't getting the accommodations they need.
And so, what was your experience like finding out about your individual disabilities in the world of neurodivergence and ADHD?
That was an interesting one because I already had all of my physical disabilities, I suppose, and some invisible ones, but already had all of those. But as a later diagnosed person, everything fell into place and made a lot more sense. I'm like, oh, that's why I've always done that, and that's why that happened. That it's not. I don't just need to read another book, another something, and try and fix it, quote unquote. But that's just me. So I've become a lot more comfortable with everything that I previously thought was a deficiency, I suppose.
And what was the diagnosis journey for you like? Did you kind of like go in to someone saying like, hey, can I be tested for this? Or what was your experience with that?
My experience was horrible, and it's great now that I've found someone wonderful, but it's been, let me see, close to just under a decade probably. So I started talking to different specialists about it, and I have a great GP and people like that, and was dismissed multiple times. Somebody laughed at me and got the feedback about, oh, everyone's got that these days. Every woman in their 40s is complaining about all the usual stuff, unfortunately. So I got a bit gun shy and just lived with it, I suppose, all of these symptoms, which had got worse since my brain injury and were getting worse again. Just lived with it as a way to, I suppose, just masking, thinking, it can't be me. They're the doctors. They know what they're talking about. And finally found someone who was really great to speak to, who did do all the testing and the everything like that. So it's been really good working with her.
And so then when you kind of go into various business spaces, are you upfront with kind of your disabilities that need accommodations, or like are you kind of focusing on one thing? Like how much are you disclosing into the spaces you end up in for work?
I'm fairly honest with pretty much everything. I suppose some things are more obvious than others. I'm in a wheelchair full time, so I need wheelchair access and things like that. And then even before we started recording, I remember saying to you, just know that there may be a little bit of processing speed, because my processing speed has dropped since my brain injury. So if you ask me a question and there's a pause, you may have to edit that out.
And so then when, you mentioned how right after, you were getting out of the hospital, like you didn't have the capacity to do the work. And now here you are kind of working with your disabilities, living full time in the wheelchair, having conversations. What was the progression like for you? Was it something that you just kind of kept striving for? Or was it like extremely difficult to get from one place to knowing like everything that happened before the stroke?
So everything that, edit this bit out. Yeah, the one mistake I did make going back to my initial recovery was that I wrongly assumed that um, life will return to quote unquote normal. Um, I'll walk again. I'll do these things again. And two things. Firstly, I made walking my objective, and that was the biggest mistake I ever made because I spent a couple of years just doing daily rehab, trying to teach myself how to walk. Um, and that was never going to happen, at least not safely. And if only I had just gone, well, you know what? Life in a wheelchair is not going to be that bad. If only I'd had that understanding back then, I would have jumped straight in a wheelchair and got on with life like I'm now. Got me around the gym, around the world. I love my wheelchair. And the other mistake I made was assuming that a brain injury would just, because I couldn't see it, I suppose invisible disabilities, it's difficult for everyone to know, but I couldn't see it myself. So I was like, oh, it's no biggie. But it's actually more challenging for me personally than my prosthetic leg, my wheelchair, my missing fingertips, all the physical stuff. It's what you can't see, and that for me is more challenging. So not understanding that early on, I just thought I could go back to an advertising agency and start working same hours, 8 a.m. till 9 p.m., crazy hours. And even though those sorts of hours, I loved that adrenaline rush, it definitely was not compatible with my new life.
Yes, and having to deal with the tangible and the intangible, or the visible and the invisible, um, to be balancing all of that at once. Had you previously, because you did at one point want to make walking a goal, had you interacted with a lot of people in a wheelchair previously?
Yes and no. Like I went right through school with kids in a wheelchair and with other disabilities, but not an awful lot. A lot of what I knew, even though I had friends and family with disabilities, a lot of what I knew about disability was fed to me through media and pop culture and things like that. So that's another reason why I do so much of the work I do today, because I knew that I couldn't change anything about my disabilities. They were all permanent. But what I could do was help to change the way we were being represented in some of the world's most powerful and influential industries that were telling me and people like me that we were worthless or less than or shouldn't be employed because we were all incapable, and just those really harmful stereotypes. So I never ever want anyone to feel like I did 20 years ago in hospital. And every year thousands of people, or millions, are acquiring disabilities, and parents are being told your child has been or will be born with a disability and getting diagnoses. I never want anyone to feel that way, that life's pretty shit now that I've got disabilities, because it's not. It doesn't have to be.
And so do you find in the past 20 years, as you've been in a wheelchair, that the world is more accommodating? Because you've talked about travel,
Mm-hmm.
or has everything kind of been sort of status quo?
I think it has improved, although I know it has improved a little bit. Um, I'm thinking back to maybe 15 odd years ago when I started my business and was engaging with businesses about including diversity, including disability, and being, better representing us, and just got some raised eyebrows and like, oh, why would we do that? That's not worth our time. But now to see airlines, I suppose, having diversity and inclusion people on the staff who are, their specific job is to look after individuals like myself, not that I need looking after, but specifically there to address travel needs for people with disabilities. There's more and more awareness about the value of the disabled consumer and the disabled traveller. I don't know the exact stat. I know people who do, though. And as travellers, as consumers, we we spend money on airfares, clothes, all of those sorts of things. So that dollar value wasn't there 20 odd years ago, and certainly wasn't being talked about. There was no social media as well. But these days, that information is shared a lot. There's reports and things like that going into these things which weren't previously happening. You know, the value of the disabled traveller, for example, the dollar value. I think that's making businesses change their tune a little bit because they can see our worth. And sure, it shouldn't have taken a report and a dollar value for them to do that, but hey, it's happening, so we'll do what we can.
Right. And so where are you traveling to? Like, what are you getting up to outside of your home base?
So next week I'm down in Sydney. There's a really exciting employment seminar happening down there. Bus Stop Films is an organisation here in Australia. They're brilliant, and they train and educate people with disabilities to work behind the camera. Also acting as well, but really interested in that inclusive filmmaking space and inclusive advertising and all of those sorts of things. So they're holding a employment summit down in Sydney, and I'm going down to that to moderate a panel about advertising, inclusive advertising with industry professionals and people with disabilities. And then get to Melbourne a bit as well in Australia. But we love different places overseas, but of course everything comes down to what is accessible and what's not. So I've been to Fiji a few times because part of the family's there, but unfortunately it's really not accessible. So I don't leave the hotel much.
And so, in your travels, the first one you mentioned was this job related position. Did you always imagine that you would end up in advertising? Like, was that always the main goal?
Yeah, sorry, I never guessed I'd be doing being an inclusive advertising consultant, but I always really loved advertising. But going back to, I'm not sure how it works over your side of the world, but when you're in high school, you pick all your subjects for your senior year levels, and I wanted to be an occupational therapist desperately. And so I studied science and picked all my science subjects and really didn't enjoy any of them. And did my work experience at a hospital where I was later a patient for the year. But yeah, obviously didn't become an occupational therapist. And then in my final semesters at school, did this course in advertising and creating a campaign, and like, wow, what is this? This is awesome. And then fell into advertising and didn't look back until obviously 2005 when everything happened. I was like, well, I love this job, but I can't do it in the same way, but I still want to be involved. So rather than work in the agencies, I'll consult to them as a way to stay involved, I guess.
And do you think, long term, you'll continue to stay as a consultant, or you might end up at some point back kind of in the agencies?
I don't think I'll end up back in the agencies. I think I'll always be doing something that's a little bit creative / social justice. And that's what I love about what I'm doing now. It's where creativity meets social justice, and it's a bit of a blend. But I've always said that I hope not to be a disability consultant. I want to be retired, because it would be great if everyone just knew that they have to include disability. They don't need someone to show them exactly how to do it. But we're in such an evolutionary stage at the moment, I suppose, that it's kind of necessary.
Mm-hmm. Right. Like, now is the time. Ideally, your position wouldn't be needed, but here we are.
Yeah.
Now, was social justice a part of your life before the injury, or did that kind of come with advocating for yourself?
it had always been part of my pre-disability life, but I suppose growing up pre-disability, I just been a feisty little feminist, arguing for women's rights and the inclusion of women in advertising and things like that, because I had no lived experience and I was an ally for disability, but wasn't the outspoken advocate that I am now.
And do you find that there are more advocates in advertising than there was 20 years ago, whether for disability, whether for women's rights, or like kind of what is the vibe for inclusivity in advertising?
I'm seeing a lot more, whether it's individuals or organisations, they're on Stereotype Alliance, which is part of UN Women. That's one organisation. They have a base here in Australia. They're doing representation, whether it's gender, ethnicity, disability, that sort of thing, across advertising. But I love their work. And they went around 20 years ago, and there's lots of other organisations, one based here in Melbourne, Mavens, who work specifically around representations, gender inclusion, gender equity, and those sorts of things in advertising. So I'm really happy to see them popping up, and would love to see more. But also back to myself, I wish they didn't exist and didn't have to exist, but at the moment they do, and it's wonderful that they do.
And do you think, as ideally the advertising industry becomes more inclusive, would you see yourself kind of staying in advertising in a different facet, or kind of staying on the social justice movement before the ideal of retirement?
That's a really good question that I don't have a good answer to. And I only say that because anything is really possible. And I'm doing my PhD at the moment, and who knows what area I'm going to go in after that. I really enjoy social justice and creativity. A combination of them both. I think just one. Don't know if I'd enjoy nearly as much, but I just have learned from everything that anything can happen. So honestly, who knows?
And what are you getting your PhD in?
That'll be in disability employment and how representation in advertising of disability, the correct representation, affects our employment outcomes and other social outcomes.
And what is your PhD experience like? Is it very rigorous? Is it something that's going to take many, many years? What is kind of like the background that got you into the level to be able to get a PhD, and how is it going?
It's going well so far, and I certainly hope it doesn't take many, many years, because I enjoy the research process, because I did a research proposal last year, and that's having those boundaries and that structure, and that really worked for me, and I really enjoyed it. So it's a bit of a slog. So watch this space. Ask me in a couple of years, and I may just be defeated.
Yes, but I mean, a PhD, you're doing research, you'll figure out your thesis. So I'm sure a lot of good work to come.
I hope so.
And what sort of pre-PhD accreditations do you have?
I hold 2 degrees in business communications and media. So that was a little while ago, but I did those prior to my PhD.
And what got you kind of to the point of, I think I'm going to go for my PhD, since there was a little bit of a gap?
wanting a new challenge, I suppose, and that's definitely ticked that off the list. Definitely challenging, but I've been spending time in academia and being involved with different projects and those sorts of things. So I wanted a challenge for myself, but I also wanted to create change. There's things that need to happen around advertising representation. There's currently no research for that and everything. So, well, if no one else is going to do it, I'll put my hand up and see how I go. But it's still early days, so watch this space.
Yeah, still lots to get done. What do you think is the biggest change that is needed in media when it comes to inclusive representation?
Oh, big question. There's so much that needs to change, but in my experience, it's visibility. And by visibility, that doesn't mean white heterosexual guys in wheelchairs on the TV. It can be how we talk about disability in a news story or the headline or something like that. It doesn't have to be what you can see, but also including us, not just if media is writing a story about the budget, get some opinions from people with disabilities. We too have opinions about climate change and fashion. You name it, we do, but unfortunately, we only get those opinions if it's about wheelchairs or something, NHS or whatever it is on your side of the world. There's so much in media that can include disability, but it does start with that appropriate visibility that's authentic and consistent.
And is there an example of an agency or a specific part of media that you think is doing a really good job of showcasing inclusivity?
I know Channel 9 here in Australia did something recently with the Paralympic Games, and there's something that I'm really, really excited about. It's not mine at all, but I want to share it with the world because it's wonderful. It's called Inclusively Made, and I don't know if you're familiar with the Heart Foundation here in Australia. Food that passed a certain criteria got a little logo on it, the Heart Foundation tick. And it's basically that, but for media and advertising and things like that. If a film, an advertisement or something is inclusively made, so it has involvement of people with disabilities in front of or behind the camera or both, it passes the accreditation to be inclusively made. And it's only really, really recent here, and Bus Stop Films is behind that as well. But the Channel 9 ran the Paralympics over here, and they did a whole lot to ensure that it wasn't just Paralympians on the screen for a couple of weeks and then nothing more. They ensured that the production crew had disabilities, and there was all sorts of inclusion of disability in front of and behind the camera. So they did a really good job. They've been doing an okay job for a couple of years now. ABC here in Australia also do a pretty good job with on-screen representation. They have a sports reporter who just happens to be in a wheelchair. Hi, Charles Bryce. And there's a few other people who, Naz Campanella, who just happens to be vision impaired. So it's really, really great to see those sorts of things. There's still a long way to go, though.
Of course. Were you kind of aware of disability being visible before your disability, or was it more of something that you became hyper aware of once you were more ingrained into the community?
I was aware of it, but I've certainly become hyper aware of it now. But I was aware of it, but I was also aware that the way we were being represented was shithouse. And I know that because when I was first told I was going to be physically disabled, be in a wheelchair for life, be vision impaired, all these things, I was terrified because I'm like, oh, disability means this. And I didn't realize that fear was only because I had 24 years worth of media stereotypes in my head. And like I said before, we couldn't change my disabilities, but we can change the way we're represented so that no one ever has to feel that way, because disability is different for every single person, but it's not just going to the Paralympics and being a tragic misery. They were the only two stereotypes that are really presented to us over here in Australian TV anyway. So changing that, and social media has helped a lot because a lot of us are now able to create our own narratives and produce our own content and show our own lives. So we're not just relying on the gatekeepers who, decide that you don't fit the bill, you don't look a certain way, or you don't talk a certain way, or act a certain way. No. So that's changed for all sorts of minority groups as well, gender and culturally diverse groups. We're seeing a lot more diversity on the screens that now reflects society.
Yes, being able to, share your own narrative and, having other people out and visible, with being initially so terrified of life in a wheelchair, how quickly, I guess would be the right word, did that perception start to change and you were able to be like, yeah, I can do this?
I think it probably will, that first year in hospital, which is a blur, and then a couple of years after that, I was still trying to walk, and then maybe 3-4 years. There was no set point. I know there were certain times in hospital that made me more comfortable with disability generally, and one of those was when they told me my leg was going to be amputated. The first time I cried my eyes out, woke up the next morning, had completely forgotten because of my brain injury. So they told me again several weeks later when my brain was a bit more healed from the stroke. And this time I remembered, and I was devastated. I just cried my eyes out for days. They sent all the brilliant psychologists, psychiatrists, and everyone they could find into my room to talk with me, but nobody could help me. I was just a mess. And finally my surgeon organised a girl to come and speak with me. And I'd been told she'd been through the same things. And I remember this beautiful glamazon walked into my room, just walked in, hair breezing. And I thought, you bitch, what do you know about my life? This is what? And she sat down and proceeded to tell me that both her legs had been amputated, one arm and her fingertips as well. She was also partially blind. And I was absolutely gobsmacked. I've got goosebumps now telling you this. Her name was Phoebe, and Phoebe absolutely changed my world. She told me how she'd been to London, was studying, had met this guy, and I was like, what? This is not what I knew that disability was meant. And so that was a turning point for me. I'm like, no, life can actually look pretty okay with disabilities. And Phoebe obviously had 2 prosthetic legs and things like that. But that was a huge turning point for me. And that's another reason why I do share my story when I can about, I don't want to paint it as just sunshine and roses, but life can be manageable and okay with a disability, because I know the value of people sharing their stories with me.
Yes. Have you had a moment like that for you where you've, connected with someone in the kind of like pre-stages when they're in the hospital, or just kind of learning of this is the future that my life will be?
I have had a few. Before I did a lot with disability advocacy, I did a lot more work with body confidence and body image, because I knew that I couldn't get straight out of hospital and become a disability advocate overnight and start speaking about it, and to the same extent that I am now. I mean, you can obviously be an ally and do great things, but what I did know was that even though my body was a bit messed up, so there's scars and missing pieces everywhere, I still felt generally okay with it. And I wish the 17-year-old version of me or something had known those sorts of things. I'm like, I want to speak to young teenagers about body image and body confidence, because they've got media and all of these, images coming to them about this is how you should look, this is how you should, and that's bullshit. Because having worked in media, I knew all the effort we went to behind the scenes to Photoshop things and do stuff like that. So I'll just go and talk to them about that, sort of, again, combining my media background and my lived experience, but in a different perspective, or from a different perspective. So, and I had a lot of young people come up to me afterwards and say, thank you so much, you've really changed my perspective on things. And so that's always really nice to hear, but I wanted to do more than just change the minds and the perspectives of teenagers. I'm like, we can work with business and government and industry and change their minds too.
Yeah, I bet it sounds like it was a good place to start, a good place to kind of like dip your toes in more full-time advocacy outside of being full-time in an advertising agency. And now you're in a place of like just talking to more people and getting through to larger institutions.
Yeah, I suppose they're the ones who can really shift the needle and create the change. So that's become a bit of a plan is to work with them more at the moment.
Yeah. Now, before I start to wrap things up, I want to give you a chance to kind of share anything with the listeners that I haven't prompted you on yet, whether it's kind of about work, personal, anything at this point that you would like to share and make sure people hear.
If you do have a newly acquired disability, don't be afraid to do things your way, whatever feels right for you. I know I wanted to get into disability advocacy, but was told there's only one way to be a disability advocate. You have to sound like this, write like this, do it this way. And I was really terrified of challenging that and not doing it that way. But now it's all I do, and I really love it that I was true to myself and didn't try and fit into someone else's box of how a disability advocate should look.
Right. It's good to hear how, you loved your former career and now you love what you're doing, even though, this wasn't originally the path, but you've like found a place in working.
Yeah. I really, really enjoy my work.
Great. Now, at the end of all my episodes, I do ask my guests a random question. So my question for you today is, what is your favorite Disney or just general cartoon character?
Disney needs to do a lot of work with their representation, but we'll just park that for a moment. I don't watch an awful lot of Disney, but I suppose Cinderella is the first one that comes to mind. And I don't know if I have a favourite one because I'm so annoyed with Disney for what they're doing at the moment and not including disability, but like heaps of characters come to mind. Even the way the prince rides in, and that's a feminist issue as well, but it's also wrong. Like, I can't help but think how wrong Disney is. But yeah, Cinderella's a little bit quirky. I know because of my brain injury, I can't remember what my husband said 20 minutes ago, but I can still remember all the words to Roald Dahl, the Cinderella. I guess you think you know this story, you don't know the rules. That's like 30 years ago. I can still remember that.
All right, that brings this episode to a close. So, of course, if you would like to connect with Lisa, her website, along with a couple social medias, will be in the description. LinkedIn and Instagram. She is most vocal and on Instagram, so feel free to go check her out there. If you'd like to connect with the podcast, our website is in the description as well. It brings you to our social medias. We are on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. If you'd like to go follow those pages, that support is always appreciated. The website, of course, brings you to all of our past episodes, so feel free to go find other stories similar to Lisa's. And if you would like to be a guest and share your story, my email is in the description. That is always the best way to reach out to me. And if you'd like to support the podcast monetarily, there is a link to do that as well. So thank you so much, Lisa, for spending time with me today, and to my listeners for taking the time out of your day to hear a new story. Until next time, bye.
Thanks, Sarah. Really enjoyed speaking with you. Bye.